France holds a minute's silence for the 12 victims of Wednesday's massacre at Charlie Hebdo magazine. French police are hunting the two main suspects in the cold-blooded shooting. Amid reports, the murderers have been spotted around Paris. And less than 24 hours after the magazine was attacked, explosions and gunfire are reported at 3 mosques, and a policewoman's been shot dead in the south of Paris. Hello, thanks for choosing RT International live from Moscow. It's 5 p.m. here now. I'm Kevin Owen. The main story today, a massive manhunt's underway for the two brothers who are believed to have massacred the staff of the Charlie Hebdo magazine. RT's Polly is following events for us as they develop in Paris.
Paris is in a virtual security lockdown. There is a large-scale manhunt underway after reports of men matching the description of the two armed suspects at a petrol station north of Paris, but now more recently reports that they could be headed towards the northeast of the capital in a Renault Clio. There have been reports of helicopters flying above the north of Paris. Entrances to the city have been sealed off, and there are armed police and armoured vehicles watching very closely what's taking place there. But the police did earlier release the identity of those two suspects. They are two brothers thought to be from Paris in their 30s. One of the men had already served time in a French prison for terror offences. He was convicted for trying to funnel fighters to go over to join the insurgency in Iraq. Now, the police have also confirmed that an 18-year-old suspect handed himself in to the authorities throughout the course of the night in the Champagne region. But questions now raised over how security forces could have allowed this attack to take place, given that at least one of these suspects was already known to the police.
Meanwhile, according to unconfirmed reports, jihadist flags and Molotov cocktails have been found in a car abandoned by the suspects. Let me just remind you of what happened over the last, more than 24 hours now, at the magazine headquarters Wednesday. Several masked gunmen armed with assault rifles broke into that building during a morning editorial meeting. And in this video, which we've blurred and edited because it's too graphic to show, the two gunmen run up to a police officer and shoot him in the head at point-blank range. The attackers then return back to their black hatchback and flee the scene. Barely a day after the brazen attack, French police have been shot at again by unidentified gunmen, and news just in, police have labelled that a terror attack. RT's Polly has more.
We are hearing about other incidents taking place throughout France. There has been a shooting in a southern Paris suburb where French media report that one female policewoman has been shot dead. There have also been attacks against mosques, one in the south of France. We've heard of a training grenade thrown at a mosque in a western suburb of Paris, as well as some kind of blast that took place in a cafe near a mosque near Lyon. But it's important to stress that the police haven't yet linked any of these incidents to the attack against the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo. Nevertheless, tensions here remain high as that manhunt is underway.
I spoke earlier on about the tensions in French society right now with Ashgar Bukhari. He's a founding member of Britain's Muslim Public Affairs Committee. He told me that both communities should work on the differences to change the situation for the better.
It's going to take massive effort from both communities to make people realise that extremists on either end of the spectrum shouldn't be allowed to polarise the society as it seems to be doing.
As you say, Ashgar, I mean, tensions have been rising in France between the ethnic French, if you like, and the Muslim population there. For a long time, this has been building for a while. OK, all came to a head, some would say, yesterday. Should more have been done to see this coming?
If you look at this in a deeper way, what you have is a worldwide context where there seems to be across Europe and across the Muslim world a polarization, a hardening of views, a feeling that we're so different that we can't live together and we have to be at war. And you know, the war on terror hasn't helped that at all. The massive destruction across the Muslim world has exacerbated the extremism within the Muslim world and made Muslims feel that they are under attack and hated by the West. What has to give is people far more powerful, sadly, than me or you, have to change the mood music. We have to stop talking about each other as if we're enemies, as if we can't live together, as if our values are so different. We're human beings. All of us have to live in this world, and until we change that mood music, what will happen is more and more hatred will grow, polarization will grow, and these attacks aren't going to go anywhere fast.
The victims of the attack are being mourned all over France. Earlier today, a minute of silence was observed across the country. In Paris, the bells of the famous Notre Dame Cathedral were rung in memory of the dead. At night, tens of thousands of people gathered in different French cities. Many came with candles, flowers and banners saying, "I am Charlie." That phrase has been echoing around the world too as news spread of the terror attack on the satirical magazine. Crowds gathered to express their solidarity. People held up pens to symbolise their anger at the murder. Many came to the French embassies in Spain, the UK, Germany, Russia and other countries. And this is how the hashtag I am Charlie or Je suis Charlie in French spread across social media around the world. Thousands have expressed their support and grief with tweets, pictures and caricatures. Many journalists joined in the movement. The terror alert in France has now been raised to its highest level as well. Extra police and military forces have been deployed to secure the French capital. Other countries, including Spain and Denmark, have stepped up their security as well, while the UK's increased border checks at its ports. Roger Gray, who used to be a part of an elite firearms unit of the UK Metropolitan Police, told me he fears that the Paris shooters will carry out further terrorist attacks.
It's not to say, really, that it's necessarily going to be another strike at the media. It could be a strike of any kind. Given that the tensions are now raised, it may spur others of the same thought processes to go and do something else equally outrageous, but in a different format. What I fear is that these men come from a funded background, otherwise they wouldn't be carrying the kind of weapons that they are or had the training they seem to have had. And they're going to go, I think, at some stage for the death or glory. And what we need to worry about is where is that going to happen and what form is it going to take. So, you know, at the moment they're getting what they want. They're getting loads and loads of publicity, and then when they've got as much as they can from it, it will be, you know, then it will be the big bang.
The motive for the assault on the Charlie Hebdo magazine is yet to be fully established, but it's often courted with controversy in the past with its risque drawings of politicians and religious figures. The most infamous, perhaps, were caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, for which the magazine was targeted in a number of attacks, like in 2011 when the office was firebombed and its website hacked. The following year, one issue depicted the Prophet Muhammad naked. Riot police were sent to guard the magazine's office, and a number of French embassies were closed in fear of retaliation then too. Now the cartoonist behind that drawing is among those killed on Wednesday's massacre. Also dead is the editor who defended the magazine's right at the time to publish such images.
Why can't we make a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in France? Yes, of course we can. In France, we can make a caricature of anybody. In France, religion is understood like a philosophy, like an idea. So I can make a caricature of Muhammad, just as I can make a caricature of Karl Marx. I understand perfectly that Muslims do not violate the law of blasphemy, and I do not blame Muslims for not laughing at our drawings. But they should not tell me under which law I should live. I live under French law, and I do not live under the law of the Quran.
Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks knew the editor personally. He also published a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in 2007, after which he received death threats and now lives under police protection. There's even a Freedom of Expression award named after him. Vilks believes that the incident might influence editorial policy now in some media.
It's very personal because I just heard that the editor is shot, and I met him because he was a prize winner. There's a prize in my name that is the Golden Dog for freedom of expression, and he received that in Copenhagen a few months ago. So I met him, and we talked very much at that time. So it's really kind of personal loss, actually. I can see that the consequences of this will, of course, be that people are getting even more fear. I have a problem when I have lectures or when I try to have exhibitions that most things are cancelled because of fright, and I suppose that will also be a consequence in the censorship, because who dares to publish anything after this happening?
France has witnessed a string of Islamist-related attacks in recent weeks. Last month, a driver rammed his car into pedestrians, shouting "God is great," during injuring then a dozen people in the city of Dijon. Within 24 hours, there was a similar attack in the city of Nantes. Authorities, though, later said that the attackers in both cases had long histories of mental illness. We spoke to John Laughlin from the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris, and also British journalist Hafsa Kara Mustafa, who specialises on Mideast issues. Both believe the atrocities highlighted a deep problem within French society.
The sort of casual racism that was very much swept under the carpet and has remained sort of on the sidelines in the past has become a main fixture of the French media. And so Muslims are feeling more and more marginalized. There is a reaction, and the more they complain, the more there is the sort of response is, well, that's freedom of speech. Those who mock Islam are continuously appear on the media, are hailed as heroes of freedom of speech. And so that kind of issue antagonizes more and more the French Muslim community.
People will be asking themselves very serious questions about the kind of policies of multiculturalism and tolerance and so on, which, of course, these words and so on will now be repeated ad nauseam. But I'm sure lots of people will have to ask themselves now, you know, what position have we got ourselves into? We have got ourselves into a position where there are millions of Muslims all over Europe, a small minority of whom are radicalized to the extent that they are prepared to commit terrorist attacks.
Investigators are still trying to discover if the attack on the magazine is linked to any known terrorist group. France has long seen a rise in support towards radical Islamist movements. Indeed, a poll in August suggested that around 15% of respondents felt positive towards Islamic State. Last November, the jihadist group issued a video showing French nationals burning their passports. In it, the militants are heard urging French Muslims to attack enemies of Allah. They also claimed that Islamic State has weapons and transport in France and is ready to launch strikes there. Brian Levine, who's an extremism expert, told us France is fertile soil for homegrown terrorist attacks.
Several hundred French nationals that are believed to be in the Syrian theater. We have a couple of hundred that have returned and a couple of hundred that are going there probably. So almost 1,000. That is the largest of any European country. And of course, France has the largest Muslim population of any country in Europe. Additionally, the fact that you can cross borders within the Eurozone quite easily adds another dimension.
If you just joined us, a reminder then of the latest developments emerging from France. Prosecutors have now called the shooting that killed a policewoman in southern Paris today a terror attack. Here's an exclusive video from our Rupley agency, our video agency called Rupley. In the attack, the female police officer and a civilian were shot. The policewoman then later died of her injuries while one of the two gunmen was arrested. Also, there have been reports of attacks on mosques in France. In one incident, grenades were apparently thrown at a mosque in the city of Le Mans, which is west of Paris. And on Wednesday evening, unidentified gunmen shot at a mosque on the French Riviera after evening prayers. As I say, if more developments happen throughout the afternoon and evening, we will bring them to you. You can be assured of that. We have other news we're covering too around the globe. Coming up, Europe's cheap flights and porous borders are proving a benefit not only for tourists but for gangs, it seems. They're committing crimes around the EU before hopping back on a plane home. After the break, we'll tell you why that's got Europe's law enforcement worried. And coming up too, Israel's Prime Minister raises over $250,000 for his re-election campaign, and almost all of it has come from America. We'll examine that in a bit more detail too.
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
The world is changing, and we have to move away from first a Western-centric world to then a bipolar world, and now we have a multi-centered world. And we have to start changing our mindset and put the pieces together in a different way.
Hello again. While Israel's Prime Minister has officially launched his re-election campaign, it's been revealed that most of the cash for the well-funded drive comes from abroad. Official records show that more than $230,000 has come in from donors in the United States. In fact, it makes up almost 90% of Benjamin Netanyahu's re-election fund, most of it coming from just 3 American families. But even all that money can't buy popularity. Bibi's ratings are languishing as voters look to alternatives. Paula Sleer reports.
In the heart of urban Tel Aviv, next to skyscrapers and modern office buildings, one man survives with little more than the clothes on his back. His home, a small tent sheltering him from the cold of winter.
Yeah, I can't pay the basics, and if you can't pay the basics, so you can no longer eat properly, and if you can no longer eat properly, you can no longer work properly. No work, no food, it's the basics.
Elia is one of many left homeless by an economic decline that he and others blame on their Prime Minister. The result of bad policies, corruption, and being out of touch with voters. Homelessness, they claim, did not exist in Israel until Netanyahu took over the reins.
I think he's doing all the wrong decisions regarding the citizens over here, regarding apartments, regarding the welfare, regarding taking care of salaries.
Others complain that under Netanyahu's leadership, Israel launched 2 major offensives against Gaza, one in 2012 and again last summer. That's 2,500 people killed, and still the threat of another Gaza showdown looms on the horizon.
I don't think that anyone feels more secure. I mean, people feel like we're expecting a war every year or every year and a half, and going on like this forever is really not a way to live.
In the run-up to March's elections, an unofficial campaign is gaining momentum. Dubbed Anyone But Bibi, the popular nickname Israelis have for the leader many love to hate. On this site, they agree falafel, Game of Thrones, and even toilet paper are better than the man once dubbed the King of Israel.
Everything is better than Bibi. It's not only our opinion. Bibi has been too long a prime minister in Israel, and this is the status quo in Israel. Nothing changed all this time. A lot of people don't want to see Bibi anymore as a prime minister too.
Bibi fatigue, the result of being the second longest serving Israeli prime minister, 3 terms in office, nearly 9 years in total. Netanyahu recently secured another victory by winning his party's primaries. But in a country marked by so much turmoil and instability, most say that this is now the limit of his political achievements. He does, though, have one ball in his court. There is no one obvious choice to replace him. Israel's political playing field is wide open. Polis Perancis, RT, Tel Aviv.
Netanyahu's fall in popularity at home coincides too with him losing support on the international political scene. Palestine's about to join the International Criminal Court, something that Tel Aviv has been trying to prevent for years. Indeed, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has announced that the Palestinians will join the ICC in April, and they've already vowed to pursue Israel for alleged war crimes. Kurdish forces in northern Iraq say they've downed an Islamic State drone which had been monitoring their positions. It's after Kurds finally managed to push the extremists back from the embattled region near Sinjar mountain after months of fierce fighting. An RT crew travelled to the area. Here's their report.
This is the village of Hansur in the Sinjar mountains in northern Iraq. Its people, members of the Yazidi minority, are among those who bore the brunt of the Islamic State onslaught, with scores killed, captured, or driven out of their homes. The village has since been liberated by Kurdish forces, but the militants' presence can still be found in the Yazidi houses they and their families had been using. The biggest house in the village had been taken up by their leader, known as the Emir.
We arrived in Hansur on the first day it was freed by Kurdish forces. We came back to our houses and found out that their Emir lived here. The windows were painted over. Also, we found many generators belonging to Islamic State. There were wigs and bloodstains as well. The Emir and his fighters stayed in 3 houses. They had just stretched an electric wire from the nearest pole and began living there.
We found some of the personal belongings left behind by the Emir, as well as clothes worn by Islamic State militants. There are also indications that the building housed a makeshift infirmary. Walls here are covered with Islamic State slogans and writings, while some of them have been painted green and black, the colors of Islamist flags. These walls can be painted over again, but for the villagers here, memories of the Islamic State horrors will take much longer to fade. RT's crew from the Sinjar Mountains, Iraq.
The advance of Islamic State on Sinjar forced 500,000 people from the Yazidi minority to flee for their lives. More than 2,000 were taken prisoners, some were executed, while others, including young girls, were sold into slavery. We've got more on the fate of the Yazidi people at RT.com. Let's take a look at what's happening elsewhere around the world. Heavy rains caused severe flooding in parts of Brazil's most populous city. Roads and other infrastructure in Sao Paulo have been damaged because of it. Some residents had to go as far as fastening their cars to lampposts to stop them being washed away. The rail network, too, has also been badly affected by the floods, with hundreds having to get off trains and walk home. Meantime, elsewhere, more bad weather here. Whiteout conditions in Pennsylvania in the United States has caused an 18-vehicle pileup. 2 died after leaving their cars as other vehicles then ploughed into them on an interstate in near zero visibility. At least 24 others were injured. Forecasters had predicted intense snowfalls. Low-cost flights and visa-free travel may be enjoyed by tourists across the EU, but now another kind of passenger, it seems, is taking advantage of the cheap trips. Travelling gangs are highlighted as Europe's new criminal threat. Laura Smith takes a look at why Britain is the #1 destination, too.
Here at Heathrow Airport, a plane takes off or lands every 45 seconds. They're carrying the usual tourists and business people and another kind of passenger, criminals. Cheap flights and visa-free travel inside Europe mean mafia-type gangs are flying in criminals from Eastern Europe, doing a spate of robberies and then flying them out again before the police can catch up with them. According to the chief of Europol, organised gangs are bringing criminals from places like Romania and Bulgaria specifically to commit crimes, particularly old-school ones like house burglaries and jewellery store robberies. They can then get out of the country almost immediately to be replaced by other groups. And there are unwilling participants too. In December, Scotland Yard revealed that trafficking victims were being brought over by UK-based gangs for robbery weekends in London designer clothes shops. Plane ticket records suggested the gangs were block booking seats on budget flights. It's all raising questions about whether the police can cope with this kind of cross-border organised crime.
Dealing with foreign criminals makes life extremely difficult. You cannot get the information quickly, and if you arrest somebody in this country, you've got 24 hours. If you can't find that information within 24 hours, it's no use finding out 48 hours later because they've gone, and you'd probably never see them again. So it adds a huge degree of difficulty, and there's more and more statistics coming to light about the number of offences in this country that involve as either victims or suspects or both foreign national criminals. So it is a major issue, really is.
Immigration officials now work in some police stations to check suspects' immigration status and criminal record. But despite that, a report by the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration shows many foreign offenders are still being released without checking they were even allowed to remain in the country.
Laura Smith reporting there. Next, we travel to Liberia to see firsthand how the nation that's worst hit by Ebola is coping with the outbreak as we head into a new year.